The notification arrived at 3:47 a.m. The world outside was silent, the kind of silence that makes you hear your own pulse. Arjun had been awake for hours, his laptop screen casting pale blue light across his face. Another night spent scrolling through code that didn't work, job listings that didn't inspire, and dreams that didn't seem to belong to him anymore. The cursor blinked, waiting, like a patient heartbeat. He wasn't expecting anything. Certainly not a private message from Bill Gates. At first, he thought it was spam. The subject line was too simple, "Open this immediately." The sender looked official but unbelievable, "Bill Gates, verified." He hovered the mouse, torn between disbelief and curiosity. Then his phone buzzed again. A second notification. Same message. Same sender. The email client even displayed that small, impossible blue tick of verification. He clicked. The message was only one line long. "I don't usually do this, but I want you to know, you're closer than you think. Don't give up now." Arjun froze. His first reaction was laughter, a nervous, incredulous laugh. "Right," he said aloud to the empty room, "Bill Gates just wrote me a motivational quote." He shut the laptop. But he couldn't shake it off. The words lingered like heat after lightning. "You're closer than you think." He reopened the laptop. The message was still there, sitting in his inbox like a glowing ember. He stared at it again and again until something inside him shifted, not belief, exactly, but curiosity. What if it was real? Or even if it wasn't, what if the idea of it being real was enough to matter? That night, something reawakened. He didn't sleep. Instead, he began writing. Not code this time, but a plan, or maybe a declaration. Every fear he'd been suppressing, every dream he'd abandoned, spilled out onto the digital page. He wrote about the app he once dreamed of building to connect students in rural schools with retired teachers willing to mentor them online. He had dropped the idea after investors laughed at him. But now, looking at that one-line message, he felt the strange audacity to believe again. He whispered to himself, "If the world's richest man can believe in giving, then maybe I can believe in starting again." The next morning, he cleaned his desk for the first time in months. He deleted old files that smelled of failure. He built a new folder called Now. Inside it, a blank document named version 1.0, days passed. The code began to take form, slow, fragile, imperfect, but alive. Every night, he reread that message before sleeping. It became his mantra, "You're closer than you think." Then something happened. 2 weeks later, an article trended on social media. Bill Gates launches a global mentorship initiative for social innovators. The headline made his heart stop. He read the article twice, 3 times. The description matched what he was building: technology for education, mentorship, inclusion. His hands trembled. Could the email have been Connected, he didn't know. But he didn't care anymore. What mattered was that he had started. Months rolled by. He poured everything into his project: time, savings, sleep, even loneliness. His friends called it obsession, he called it purpose. When his code crashed, he imagined Gates' words whispering again, "You're closer than you think." Every setback became a test. Every small victory became sacred. One night, 6 months in, the platform went live in beta mode. A handful of schools joined. A few teachers volunteered. It wasn't much, but it was real. Arjun stared at the metrics, tears forming. After years of false starts, something was finally working, and then, the message came again, same sender. Same minimalist tone: "You've started. Now build it so it outlives you." His heart pounded. Whether it was a real message from Gates or a glitch in the digital ether no longer mattered. The universe, or something in it, had chosen him to wake up. Years later, the world would come to know MentorBridge, the platform that brought knowledge to corners of the world forgotten by governments and algorithms alike. The media would call Arjun the accidental visionary. In interviews, when asked about his inspiration, he would smile and say, "A message changed my life." But he never showed them the messages. Not once. They were his secret scripture. In the years that followed, the platform reached tens of thousands. Teachers in remote hills connected to classrooms through solar-powered tablets. Retired professors in New York mentored children in Nepal. Every story became another brick in the bridge he'd once dreamed of, and yet, success didn't silence the old doubts. Some nights, he still questioned himself. Was he good enough to lead something so vast? Could he sustain the weight of his own creation? Whenever he felt small, he'd open that old inbox, scroll to the first message, and read it again. "You're closer than you think." Those words aged with him, gaining new meanings. At first, they were fuel. Then they became faith. And finally, they became a responsibility. A call to pass the spark forward. One day, he received a real invitation, this time verified beyond doubt, to attend a private event in Seattle. A gathering of innovators hosted by the Gates Foundation. He boarded the flight, hands trembling, not knowing if this was coincidence or destiny folding back on itself. When he arrived, he found himself in a room filled with world changers, scientists, entrepreneurs, dreamers. And there, standing by a quiet corner, was Bill Gates himself. Talking softly with a small group. Arjun hesitated. His throat dried up. Then Gates turned, smiled, and gestured for him to come closer. "You're Arjun, right?" Gates said. Arjun nodded, unable to speak. "I've heard about what you're building," Gates said, extending his hand. "It's exactly the kind of idea we need more of. Simple. Scalable. Human. Arjun tried to form words but only managed, "You sent me a message once." Gates looked puzzled for a moment, then chuckled. "I send a lot of messages," he said kindly. "But if one of them helped you, that's what matters." For a second, Arjun felt the mystery dissolve. Maybe it was never magic, maybe it was just a coincidence. But then Gates leaned closer and added, "Sometimes the universe uses ordinary channels to deliver extraordinary things." That was all he needed. After that day, Arjun no longer chased validation. He chased meaning. Every time a child from a remote village logged in to learn, he saw the reflection of his own midnight despair turned into light. He began mentoring young coders himself, sending messages that began the same way, "I don't usually do this, but..." He became the message. Years passed. The platform grew beyond borders. Arjun aged, his hair silvering, but his eyes stayed young, the kind of youth that comes from doing something that matters. The world remembered him as a builder, but those who knew him remembered his quiet habit of whispering before launching any new project, "We're closer than we think." And on the day he passed, peacefully, at 87, surrounded by those he had mentored, his inbox pinged one final time. The sender name glowed again, Bill Gates, verified. The message contained a single line, "Well done. Pass it forward." No one else saw that email. Maybe no one else was meant to. But in that final moment, Arjun smiled, knowing the circle had closed, not between men, but between belief and becoming, and that's how one message, real or imagined, can change everything. Not because of who sent it, but because of what it awakened. Every dream begins the same way, with disbelief, then curiosity, then faith. The distance between failure and destiny is smaller than anyone imagines. We are all one message away from transformation, one whisper from the universe, one act of courage, one night when we choose to stay awake and believe again. So if you're reading this and wondering whether your time has come, whether your dream is still alive, whether anyone out there notices your quiet persistence, this is your message. Open it, because you are closer than you think. After his passing, the world mourned Arjun quietly but profoundly. The news spread not with the loudness of fame but with the softness of gratitude. Students, teachers, volunteers, and dreamers lit candles in their corners of the world. In remote villages and bustling cities alike, people logged into Mentor Bridge, their screens dimly glowing with a shared silence. The servers pulsed like a heartbeat, the digital echo of a man who had once believed in something bigger than himself, but stories never end with death. They scatter. They ripple. Months later, a young woman named Mira found herself standing in the same tiny apartment where Arjun had once written his first lines of code. It had been converted into a small museum, a tribute to his journey. She was 22, a recent graduate, her eyes bright with the kind of hunger the world often mistakes for recklessness. She had grown up in a remote village in Uttarakhand, where electricity was scarce but dreams were infinite. As a child, she had used MentorBridge. A volunteer from Kenya had taught her English through that platform. Another from Japan had shown her how to build simple circuits using old batteries. To Mira, the platform had been more than technology, it had been a miracle. Now she stood in that room, the air thick with history. On the desk, preserved behind glass, sat Arjun's old laptop, dented, faded, still glowing faintly on a looped screensaver that read, "You're closer than you think." Something inside her shifted. She pressed her palm against the glass, feeling warmth that couldn't possibly be real. She whispered, "I want to continue it." The curator, an elderly man who had once worked alongside Arjun, looked at her with kind eyes. "Continue what?" She smiled softly. "The message." The man nodded slowly. "Then maybe you should read this." He handed her a sealed envelope. The handwriting was unmistakable, Arjun's. Inside was a simple note, "If you're reading this, it means you felt what I felt. Don't let the spark die. Every generation thinks it's too late, until someone proves it isn't. Build what's next." There was no signature, only his initials and a drawing of a small bridge. That night, Mira couldn't sleep. She stared out at the city lights, each one like a pulse of human ambition. Somewhere out there, children still waited for mentors. Somewhere, the bridge still had gaps. She opened her laptop and created a new folder, MentorBridge 2.0. It started small again. It always does. She began designing an upgrade to bring AI tutors into the system, not to replace human mentors, but to amplify them. To create hybrid classrooms that could reach places where even the internet struggled to go. She called it Light Path. As she worked through the nights, she read everything she could find about Arjun. Old interviews, archived recordings, and finally, an obscure documentary in which he had once said, "If even one person who used this platform decides to build something better than me, I'll have succeeded twice." That line became her compass. The months turned to years. Lightpath grew, spreading like wildfire across communities. The same rural schools that had once received mentorship now trained the next generation of engineers and dreamers. And yet, Mira kept her work humble, no offices, no glamour. Just quiet persistence, until one morning, an email arrived. No subject line. Just the sender name, Bill Gates, verified. Her hands froze. She opened it. "I met someone once who believed you were the future. He was right." She burst into tears. It felt like history folding in on itself again. Like the universe had once more decided to whisper through digital threads. She replied, not out of awe, but gratitude, "Thank you. But I think it's time to pass it forward again." And so she did. She began a new initiative under the Lightpath banner, Message Forward, a global program where mentors were required to write one personal letter of encouragement to a student before completing their term. The letters weren't monitored, analyzed, or published. They were private, pure human messages, each carrying the weight of unseen transformation. Somewhere in Kenya, a young boy received a message from his mentor that read, "You're closer than you think." He smiled without knowing why those words carried the gravity of generations. Years passed. Myra's project merged into the fabric of education itself. Governments adapted it. NGOs expanded it. Eventually, it became a living, evolving network that connected people not by geography, but by possibility. The world changed, quietly but irreversibly, and then, long after Myra had retired, a new rumor began to spread, about a mysterious digital archive discovered inside MentorBridge's oldest servers. It contained thousands of unread messages, encrypted and unsigned, each one carrying fragments of hope, advice, and encouragement. Historians called it the Bridge Vault. No one knew who wrote the first message. Some said it was Arjun. Some said it was Gates. Some believed it was an algorithm trained to inspire, but the truth didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that the messages lived on, passed through decades, changing lives silently, invisibly, beautifully, in a distant future, in a classroom that floated among the clouds, a structure powered by solar winds and AI. A child sat before a holographic screen. Her name was Isha. She was 10. She tapped a small icon on her console labeled Messages from the Past. The system displayed a single glowing line, "I don't usually do this, but I want you to know, you're closer than you think." She smiled, not knowing the centuries of history behind that phrase. She only felt warmth, a strange certainty that the universe had just spoken to her personally. She whispered, "Thank you," and got back to work on her dream project, designing a sustainable energy network for planets not yet colonized. Somewhere, in the unseen weave of data and destiny, the old messages pulsed again, alive and eternal, and maybe that's how the universe really works. Not through miracles or billionaires or sudden fame, but through the quiet persistence of belief, passed. Like a torch from one heart to another, across decades and distances, one message. One spark. One soul deciding to believe again.